Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Mindy Raquant podcast. I am your host, Mindy Raquant, and we are continuing the topic that we started last week, and I'm going to be talking about how to quiet your heart and keep your focus set on Jesus, even during the chaos of everyday life. And that's what we're going to be talking about. If you did not listen to the last episode, I would encourage you to go back and watch it because it explains some of the background to this subject. So, I can link it below for you. So we'll see how this goes because Liam is playing outside and I don't have anybody else watching him. So we'll see how this goes. But to start off, I am going to read Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught, but Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." But the Lord said to her, "My dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her." So, something that probably we all think about quiet time is that we don't have time to have quiet time because, we're all busy and we have daily life and stuff going on, and we just think we don't have time for it. But the thing here that we see in this passage is that Jesus was not saying that Martha was wrong for working. He wasn't saying that work was wrong. He was actually addressing her heart and her heart motives in her work. So she was more worried about her work than what Jesus had to say. And I looked up the Greek word for distracted, and it means to draw away. So she was actually allowing all these other details to draw her attention away from Jesus. And we all have circumstances and daily life that demands our attention, but in that daily life, where is my heart drawn to? Sorry, little interruption there. So in daily life, where is my heart drawn to and what are we focusing on? It's possible to have daily life and have appointments and dishes to wash and laundry to do and cleaning the bathroom and all kinds of responsibilities and stuff that we do every day and whatever work that we do, and have a distracted focus in that work. And that is shown by complaining, and we don't have thankfulness, and we're not spending time with God. We are not focusing on Him. We're just thinking about ourselves and all the work, and we're not focusing on how to prioritize life with God, and we're certainly not listening to the voice of God in all of that. So something that I had not really thought about before is that Martha and Mary had the exact same circumstances, but one of them chose to be drawn away from Jesus while the other one chose to be drawn to Him. And that's really the difference. So while we have all of these daily life demands and responsibilities, are we letting them draw us to Jesus or away from Him? Are we letting all of our daily life responsibilities take all of our focus? Or are we letting them drive us to Him rather than away? Are we actually inviting Jesus into our daily lives? And while we work, are we talking to Him and are we listening to Him? Do we have a heart that pushes away distractions? And do we make room for Him? Is He the one that we gravitate to when we are stressed and we're anxious about details and stuff like that? So those are some questions that can help you figure out where your heart is at. And there is no shame in being imperfect. There's no shame in messing up in this. Nobody is perfect, and Jesus is not asking us to be perfect. I know that I at least tend to have such a performance mindset about stuff, and I tend to think that everything has to look perfect before I can invite Jesus in, like as though he's worried about what my house looks like. And this is not about getting it right. This is about the posture of my heart versus what does my house look like. And inviting Jesus in does not mean that your house will suddenly be clean all the time. The miracles that he does are on the inside, and he's going to make your heart clean. And this is the essence of worship, like what we talked about last week. What we focus on in the middle of daily life pressures is what we're worshiping. And while it is very important to make sure we are inviting Jesus in while we're working and while we're doing stuff, it is so incredibly important to spend even just 5 minutes quieting our hearts and being still with God. Sorry. I am starting to teach my 2-year-old how to have quiet time so that I can spend time being still, and he just stays in his bed and plays with toys while I can sit and catch my breath for a minute. And I know that for me, a lot of times when I go to sit down and I go to spend time with God, my mind is full of thoughts and full of things that I have to remember. And so what helps me is to write. I definitely keep a journal. That's something I've done for years. And I just write down all the thoughts that are going through my head and all the things that I need to process. And then I feel like I can release and I can let go and not stress about it. And I can just listen to what God has to say to me. So I don't know what that is for you. Sometimes going for a walk can do it. And sometimes you might need to verbalize your thoughts. Maybe you need to talk, tell God all of your thoughts, make it into a prayer. Whatever it is that you need to do, whatever, you can be creative and come up with your personal strategy for clearing all those thoughts, all the junk, all the stuff out of your mind. And then just let him come in and fill your mind and just listen. Just be still and listen. And it takes time. He doesn't just instantly speak. And it takes, letting his presence settle over you, letting the Holy Spirit settle on you. And sometimes it takes just being still for a few minutes. And then he will start to speak. And he does not speak audibly. So of course, there might be stories of God speaking audibly to people. I've heard stories like that before, which is great, but that's not how God normally speaks. He speaks in a still, small voice in your mind, and you have to have the ears to hear it. And I think that sometimes people overthink hearing from God. It's not something complicated. It's not something that's over the top spiritual people, special people who get to hear from God. No, this is everyday people can hear from God. It's all about where your focus is, and so the more that you hear it, the more he will speak to you. And if you really want God to speak to you, he will speak to those who really desire it. And sometimes when I hear from God, he tells me something that I need to do, and I don't do it, I have to actually go back to what he said to me originally and be like, okay, I have to do this, because he's not going to speak to me again after I haven't done what he already said. So that's something to keep in mind. He's not going to keep speaking if you don't obey him, and obedience is really the way to start a cycle. You obey, and then he'll speak to you more. Then you obey again, and he'll speak to you again. It just goes on and on and on. It continues and gets more and more. And another thing you can do is keep a list of everything that you think you hear. If there's a dream you had, if there's some kind of significant circumstance, or something that you thought you heard him say, write it down and keep a list. And before long, you'll start to see a pattern and you'll start to recognize what God says. So, as we develop this practice of listening and then doing, it becomes easier to listen and keep a quiet heart while we're working. And maybe even driving for you is a good time to practice listening. Different things work best for different people. And even though it is important to have clean house and to work, it is more important to Jesus to have a heart that is clean and free from distraction. Dirt is just a temporary earthly thing, and both things are just a temporary physical thing that are gonna disappear in eternity. And so Jesus sees the damage that fear and anxiety and stress and worry does to your heart, and he wants to clean that out of you. He's the Prince of Peace, and he's come to bring rest to our weary, anxious hearts. And yeah, we just need to prioritize time with God. We need to fight for it because there are so many things that are fighting for our attention. There are so many things clamoring and screaming to get into your head, and so much that's just thrown at us. And we have to make time for God. We have to fight for that time with him. So do whatever it takes, but I promise you that it's so rewarding. And that's all that I have for you this time. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope this was a blessing and encouragement to you. So I will see you guys next week. Bye.